tell me a little bit about yourself in terms of your difference growing up. Yeah, why don't we start there?
So growing up, I would always play with my baby dolls and everything, and so that was always fun and everything. And my mom would always try to get me to like learn and stuff, and I wasn't really into it. And then when I went into like kindergarten, preschool, my parents got me tested through the school district,
Okay.
and then that came out as a learning disability.
Okay.
So then they're like, okay, your kid has this, this, and this, like dyslexia and short-term memory, and just kept going and going and going. And my mom's like, okay. They're like, yeah, she has everything, you know. And my mom was like, I don't know about that. So then they would like move me. So the principals were good, but they didn't really understand. Like we didn't have a huge program where I'm from. So they like put me in different classrooms to figure out what was best for me. A special education classroom, which was kind of easy, or a regular ed, which was hard. So they kind of moved me in the district to different schools, trying to figure out what was best. But that was hard for me as a child because I was like trying to make friends and understanding what's going on. And then from there, my parents would always fight for my education laws and everything. And they just didn't really understand a lot of it. And back then we didn't know about like the MISD and stuff like that because it wasn't that big for us,
Right.
you know. And back then everything was pen and paper. You sit there, you do it. That's all they knew.
Of course.
So that was very difficult. So I remember going into all these IEP meetings with my parents and would always just hear negative things about what's going on and like, would I ever make it in life and like, how would I succeed and all these things. And I just remember going through all those meetings and like not understanding why I have to go through them because I was in some regular ed classes. So then it happened in elementary school and into middle school. It started to like get a little better for me. I was in special ed classes, but they were a little bit more challenging with the help. And then my language arts teacher, went to this conference that they had, the MISD, and this guy came from Denver, Colorado, and he started a program called Fast Learning. I'll show you.
Okay, wonderful.
It's called Fast Learning.
Okay.
And so what happened was this teacher was off for a week, but what happened was there was these other teachers that came. There was about like 50 of them.
Oh, wow.
And they kind of like talked down about me when I was younger. And so when I was there, so my mom, what happened was the guy asked my teacher, do you know anybody that could be an awesome like person I want to show you guys. So this program's not really popular because it's expensive. So that's why he came here. So this was like a huge opportunity. And so my teacher thought about me, called my mom, and my principal signed me up for about a week. So I would meet my teacher there for like that whole week. And so I sat in front with the guy and he wanted to show the teachers how it works. And so then when I was sitting there, he's like, okay, I'm going to work with you. I'm going to show them how this works and it's going to work. And I was like, okay. So what he told us is what would happen is you start like, let's say I was like in a 3rd grade learning and he wanted me to be in the 8th grade. It can go up 8 levels within a day and a half. Wow. So we're like, okay, let's see if this is true, So he did. He worked with me. Coming to find out the next day when I came back, my head hurt, like so bad. And I was like, my head hurts. And he's like, yeah, there's a part in your left side of your brain that was never used. He's like, it's getting used. You're already up. So by the 3rd day, I was up to an 8th grade reading level. So that was awesome. And then, so actually all of those teachers that were in there are the ones that like didn't talk very good about me. So they were shocked. It was like a pin dropped in the room. And I just like remember that moment. My mom was crying and that was an awesome opportunity. So then that helped me get through high school. I still had those IEP meetings and everything. And then I got through, but it was kind of like being your buddy's teacher to help get you through kind of, trying to be like, oh, I need help with this. Can you help me? And then from there I got out and I wanted to go to college. And I was like, I know what I want to do. I always wanted to like own a daycare because I felt like I didn't get the help that I needed when I was younger.
Mhm.
And I love children. And so the first time I went in, they denied me because my test scorings were too like low. So then I was like really sad, depressed, down, not sure what to do. So then that kind of scared me. So then I decided for a good few years to go and volunteer because I'm like, I'm not going to let this get to me. So I volunteered all different places, like wedding events to shadowing teachers again because I'm like, maybe I do want to be a teacher. Just like all different things. And so I did that for a while. And then that led me just about a year and a half ago. I'm like, okay, they gave me so much anxiety from what they told me. And I had like just a bad counselor about like I would never make it in life and all that. So I was like, no. So I waited a few years, went back because I had to get like counseling and I got on medication for so long. My parents never believed in it at all. And I didn't either, but I knew it was the right timing. It was only for so long. So then I got on that, got some counseling, and then I ended back there. My scores went up, did awesome. Now I'm in college. And so that really helped so much. You know, sometimes you just have to wait. You know, like I know that I am a normal, and I don't want to say normal, but like I'm just like everybody else. I might just learn slower. Where before it was like they kind of tell you, no, if you don't get it, you're done, you know?
Right.
So that's what I always knew. And then in the college doing that, the second time around, it's different. They, you know, I've had these people that have helped me through and they're like, oh my gosh, you know, like, what'd you do? And I was like, well, I did write to the, you know, the school about it because I thought that wasn't the best thing. So prior to that, then I mentored at the MISD. So I kind of got into,
What is the MISD? Just
it's a Macomb Intermediate School District.
okay.
So it's just like for kids that have disabilities and stuff before they get in. So their school district. And so I got to mentor this amazing woman that actually taught as a special ed teacher. So I kind of got a lot of feel of what she does. And now she's like, she runs a program and for Great Start. And so I got to see like what I kind of missed out on, but now I know like, okay, I see that I could do, you know, they have these options for people because I never knew that. A lot of people don't know those kind of things. So I kind of learned a little bit behind the scenes on that. And then just eating healthier. My mom tried to get me on like a whole food.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't to like lose weight or anything. It was just for my mind and what to do. And so that was awesome. And now I'm just like, I'm still on pills, not as much, but it just helps. Like, I don't feel like I'm on anything like normally people do. Because when I was little, I used to be on them and they didn't do very well. That's why my mom was terrified. And my siblings, they didn't really understand either. That's what's so hard. They never really understood me. So they thought my parents were babying me for so long. So that was really difficult because you're like, okay, no, I'm not being babied. Like, this is who I am. So I just see now more and more children going through this. And it's hard because now they have more testing they have to go through and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I know I actually met with some people before at the MISD. They were like, oh my gosh, I heard about the FAST program. Well, I was the only candidate in Michigan that's ever really had this happen. So I was like, yeah, I had this here. It was here, you know, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm running on the school districts because it's awesome. It's just, you know, the cost. So I'm just like always reaching out to people. I'm reaching out to the governor actually right now, promoting this because of Detroit. They needed a reading program. So right now I'm like, I sent it to her and try to get that in the system. We'll see. So I'm just trying like new things to like put it out there. To like sell myself just to help other people. I've thought about maybe writing a book eventually in that time frame, just depending when, you know, like keeping just always writing down things as I'm going. So yeah, I mean, that's really
Okay. So your primary learning challenges or differences, as we call them, is dyslexia, and then also I couldn't necessarily understand because you said that you take medication. Is there also some ADD, ADHD?
Yeah, there's ADD, ADHD,
Okay.
short-term memory.
Right, short-term memory. Okay.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, they all
combine.
coincide with one another. So I totally get it. So can you tell us a little bit more about some of the programs that you were mentioning? You talked about the FAST program, this program that this man came and like helped you to get you from a 3rd grade reading level to an 8th grade reading level, and kind of like what that experience was like.
Yeah, I'll show you actually. I have this right here. Actually, his son, after he had to leave, actually, this is awesome. His son, he called his son, and his son flew in for about 2 weeks to tutor me. Yeah. So that was awesome. And then after that, I found a tutor around my home that helped me. And then she was like, okay, after a couple of weeks, you're done. Well, actually, that was probably when I was in 8th grade, probably like, I don't know, 8 years ago, 9 years ago now, or longer. She actually came to my mom's work recently, and she recognized my mom, and she goes, your daughter's name is Callie, right? And she's like, yeah. She goes, I will never forget her. Like, she changed my life with the fast learning program, because there are tutors out there that help with this program. And so it's cool because she's like, I really want to meet with her to see how much she's doing and stuff. So this is what it looks like on the board. This is how he does it.
Okay.
The different colors.
Okay, so it's color coding.
Yep. So like what you would do is you add, so like if somebody says a word to you, you would try to sound it out, and then you would just put it all like in a row. And so this is how he does it. And so like that helps
specifically for reading.
Correct. Yep. Okay. With that color coded, he does these, which is really cool. This is color coded too.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like best and rest. So like how to do the INGs, the short A's, long A's. This one too. A short I, short E. So then when you understand it and you like remember it in your mind, then when they ask you the questions, you just pull it down. And then it makes sense. So he does it by color.
Got it. He asks you the questions.
Correct. Like he'll say, oh, can you spell this word? So like after a while, after you've learned your vowels and stuff like that, how he has it labeled, then you're like, okay, that makes sense. And then I just go back and take the color and be like, okay, it's this, this, and this. So that I think it works because a lot of kids nowadays use, I mean, I'm in childcare for right now, changing of thinking, moving my major a little bit, but everything's color. And I feel like with reading, you know, it's a white piece of paper with black writing, you know, that's how I learned. By this, it's like, okay, it's this color. You know, I see better with picture, obviously. And so it's like, okay, doing hands-on things. So I think that really helps a lot. And then he like will time you after a while. I actually have a board. So old, but I have a board and I have all the letters he gave me. And then he had like a timer and he would time me every day for so long. And then let me see. He always gives us homework for so long. And then what happens is when you're done with the program and they think you're ready to move on, then you just keep reading. Like, you know, you just pick up a chapter book every time. That's what mine did. And I didn't really understand it at first. I'm like, we're done. Like, how is this? She goes, no, you're at your time. Now you just keep reading. And now I read it all the time. I'm like, oh, okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that is something that I'm hoping to always try to get into the school systems. So yeah, I mean, he offers a lot. The only school that obviously that he has it at is there's a school in Colorado, a private school. That's the only school that actually has this program because they started it there. So all the kids do it. And that's a great thing too, is like, it's not for just one age. It could be, in elementary all the way up to like college, or you know what I mean? So I think that's awesome too, because I feel like a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't know this. I can't do it now.
Right.
So
how is your writing affected, if anything? Because obviously reading and writing can go hand in hand
yes.
together.
It was horrible when I was younger. It wasn't the best. I used to scribble a lot on my parents' books and stuff. And I just felt like I was dyslexia and all that. So like my words, especially in math, my words would be like, my numbers would be backwards.
Right.
Sometimes here or there, but not as much. I mean, you can kind of read it, but it wasn't really that good. I still have things that I'm like, oh my gosh. But now since this, and then just growing from that, I've learned I'm really good. I still have to look up things, obviously, like, how to write, because I'm not the best writer. But, and I know that's not one of my strong suits. So, you accept it. So, I mean, I'm way better than I was. I mean, I was really bad.
No, that's good. I mean, having a learning challenge, and I know this because I've had my own set of learning challenges, they unfortunately never go away completely. And,
oh yeah,
I mean, you learn and you compensate and you become successful and so forth, but there's always going to be some, flare-ups, quote unquote. And I do know people that have dyslexia, and I mean, they're great and they're successful and they use X, Y, and Z, strategies.
Yeah.
But on the rare occasion, I will come across and be like, oh, he or she spelled it backwards. But you've obviously grown so much, and in terms of your differences, and it's wonderful. Is it hard? Like, do you feel that it takes you, well, it must take you a lot longer to do work and like accommodations, so like for tests, for, I don't know if you get like extended time.
Yeah, I get all that. I get all the extended time, all that. Yeah, it does take me longer to do a test. I used to get really frustrated with them, like, why can't I be like everybody else? For the longest time, everything is longer, but I'm learning through it that it's what you do with it. It's how you learn, like now I'm ready to go to college. I was telling my parents, like, now I'm in college because I was ready and I know what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And like, you kind of know too, like, okay, this will not work for me, so I'm not even going to get into that. So that's kind of awesome. Back then I was like, oh, I just want to be like everybody else. And I would cry to my parents, like, I wish I was like everybody else. But now looking at it to where I'm at now, to where I was, you have like a story to tell. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, my life would be boring, like your life would be, it's like, okay, yeah, you go to school, you do this, but one thing that I feel like I've never thought of is everybody would be not the same, but more like, you think everybody can learn the same, but they're not. And I guess that's all I knew, because they don't teach you that in school.
Right.
But now I know. So now I'm like, whatever, if I can get this, I'll ask for help. Before it was like, I gotta get this. So I'm like learning that way, and just like my own ways of how I can succeed in that category.
So you're, so you've basically accepted, your learning challenges, and you're okay with it, it seems like, and you adapt, and it kind of is what it is. And, life would be much different, you said, if I didn't have these challenges. So is that right, in terms of just like now coming to a place that these are the things that now I have to just manage in my life?
Yeah, I do. Before it was like, oh, it will, and they tell you, oh, it'll go away. It doesn't go away.
Right.
And I just learned to like kind of like switch it around. Like, what can I use to help somebody else with it?
Right.
I kind of came to that
right.
effect of thinking, what can I, like, I know I'm going to struggle in school. I know it's going to be hard, but like, and then like, why am I doing that? I always have to tell myself, why am I doing this? What's the ending of it? So that's what I try to look at all the time now, is just like, yeah, I'm going to have it, but I don't have to claim it as mine either.
Right.
There's other things that you can change your mind to and be like, oh, yeah, I have that, but I can be like this. I could do the same thing, just not as long,
Right.
and I've truly believe that people that do have learning disabilities do succeed so much more. I've had friends that are just like, they just go and learn, and they tell me, like, without even saying anything, like, I'm like working harder at it and everything, and they're like, you succeed so much, like so much more than we do. And I don't say it, I'm like, oh, thank you, but really in my head I'm thinking, you kidding me, it comes easier to you, and they're like, no, you really do, you do all these things that, and I'm like, you know what, the other day I was like, that's true. You kind of get yourself into different things that a lot of people wouldn't think of or imagine, and
Right.
kind of make your own little world.
So so has your learning challenges, is it like affected some of your friendships or relationships? Because that can be sometimes an issue, just across the board. But sometimes it's not. So, um,
Um,
have you found or it hasn't affected anything?
yeah, it hasn't really affected me. I think I had it affect me um, mentally, physically more than I think people look at me, because I used to have horrible anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and I would never show it. I was always internal. And so I think it affected me mostly as as a human being person than what they thought of me, because they would be like, no, you look fine. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, So I don't really have anxiety. Probably in the last year, I actually had like a procedure done because it was so bad, my anxiety, that they wanted to make sure, like, why, and it was because my anxiety was so bad because I just couldn't eat or anything. And I just let it get to me. I would never attend anything when I was younger. I always stayed in because I was like, I'm not dealing with this. I don't think I can do it. So I would just stay home for a lot of things. And my friends didn't really understand, I just never really knew how much it can really affect you internally.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm like, wow, that really affected me. Like, so I didn't really lose any relationships from it because I kind of like keep me inside and hinder myself before somebody else would hinder me.
Right.
So that's how I did it.
Okay. How did you, were there any like support services, obviously aside from your academic, but did you, or do you like, see a therapist, or what other things have helped you in terms of like your mental health, and kind of physical health? I know you spoke about your mom, just kind of from a mental standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
suggesting that maybe you go on a certain diet, like where, what type of help did you seek, if any, other than academic, to help you?
Um, well, like counseling, I seek a lot of counseling, which I know a lot of people are very, that's another thing a lot of people don't like to do. I was never against it. My parents were, because my other siblings never had an issue.
Right.
But I think it's the best thing ever. Just talking about it and like learning the tools, I feel like that has helped me so much. Like, I know when I will be off of the pills that I will still have like those little connections and like how I can help myself. That was huge. When I was going through all this, my mom was like, kind of felt bad, and I didn't really want her to be like, oh, So she did a lot of reading, trying to figure out what was best for her child. She would watch TV shows on cooking, what is best, And so my mom's like, you know what, this past year, she's like, let's go on like a diet, but like you can help your brain. And I was like, okay, I tried different things, and so my mom's like, oh, what about a whole food, So I was like, okay. So we did that about until all this everything happened.
Or,
For the good
yeah,
3 months.
wonderful timing.
I know. I'm like, I'm getting somewhere. I'm finally healing. So for those 3 months, we started in January all the way till March. And actually, we're going to go back to it now since everything will be ending. And it was just like a lot of like soups and staying away from like carbs and junk food. I don't drink coffee anymore. That was a huge, even though it's so hard. Just certain things. And so I started on this whole food diet, and within like the first week, it's changed my energy. I feel like I can focus more, just like comprehend things more. I just always felt like I had to run and exercise and stuff like that because it gives you the energy. A lot of athletes do a whole food diet. I don't know. But so my mom got me on that, and that was probably the best thing that really helped.
So just tell me or tell us, what does a whole foods diet consist of? Specifically, like, I mean, certain proteins, vegetables.
So it's mostly like vegetables, anything that's growing out of the grass, that's whole food. So
So you're okay. So it's like whole food in terms of, and I'm sorry, maybe I'm just a little
no, you're
oblivious,
fine.
because it's a term that I'm not typically used to
A lot of
hearing.
people aren't. Yeah.
So okay, so a lot of like grown out of the grass types of food. So
Yes.
vegetables.
So whatever comes out of the ground, it's whole food. No stuff in the meat. No like hormonal stuff and all that. So I stay away from I choose to stay away from like milk and cottage cheese and stuff because that's what my mom has done, and it kind of helps me more. Like sugar, I don't drink any kind of like it has to be sugar free. Like anything sugar free. So like tea, just regular black tea. You can drink coffee, but just black coffee.
Mhm.
Some of our we have a lot of broth bowls. So we try to stay away from the meat sometimes, depending. There's like this kind of burger, it's called Veggie Burger. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. So like stuff like that, kind of meat like that. So what it does is like when it gets in your system, you kind of get hungry after so long. So you have to eat more than just 3 times a day, or lunch, breakfast, dinner.
Mhm.
You have to eat more often. So I would always have to pack lunches when I was at work because I'd be hungry. You're like running around. I was working with kids at the time. So you were like running around trying to fill yourself up. And I just feel like your stomach was smaller than normal because you're so used to it. So then when this whole thing happened, the virus, I was like, okay, I'm hungry. And my mom was like, well, we can't do it right now. So then I was like, shoot, So then I started like eating a lot more than normal, right? Because my mom would get into like all these sweets, but they were like a certain kind of sweet and all that. And then my stomach, I kept eating because I'm like, well, I'm at home and like there's nothing to do yet. And then I'm like, my stomach hurts because my stomach's not used to eating so much. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, back and forth. But yeah, that was an awesome diet because I mean, it's not like everybody else has it, but I think it came out like last year or something like that. People do it. So it's just like different. I mean, I like it. At first it was different because it was just like plain Jane, like not a lot of stuff in it.
Is there
But
protein involved? I mean,
yeah,
so
there is some.
okay, yeah, because
Yeah.
that's important. So okay, there is
Yeah.
some.
Yeah, there's some, not as much as you normally would have, but there is some like
Okay.
burgers and chicken and stuff like that. You just wouldn't be eating as much.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know when you said veggie burger if I know obviously a veggie burger is a veggie burger, but typically it just
Oh,
consists of
yeah.
vegetables. So I just wasn't sure. And I mean,
Yeah.
protein does, fill you up.
Oh,
Um,
it does.
so yeah, when there's less of that, obviously there's, you crave things more in terms of many or additional meals because you get hungry. And how about carbs? Is that okay on the diet?
I think there might be a little bit, but there's not much.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly, but I think there might be a little bit depending. And then sometimes you like switch it up. Sometimes I'm like, Mom, we could have this. And she's like, yeah, but I don't want to have it. You know what I mean? So just depending on how you take this whole thing, like how you want to do it,
Right.
Mhm.
So what do you think has been like so far in your life, like the hardest thing in terms of your challenges? Is there something in particular, whether it be an experience or some type of, academic downfall that you've had that that you feel like you kind of have gotten into a pit and kind of maybe lost hope? Or just felt like, oh my goodness, this is the hardest thing ever. Like, why do I have dyslexia and some ADD, ADHD issues? Because it's, because obviously there
Yeah.
are challenges,
Yeah. Mine was school.
Okay, just school.
Yeah, because I finally, after so many years, I mean, what was it, 2019? I finally made it in college, and I'm 25. So it took a long time. I just felt like it was a black, dark hole. I was never going to make it in life. And that's when I went through depression and anxiety and never wanting to leave my house and all that, because I was like, what am I going to do to succeed?
Was there any experience at school that you kind of remember and felt like, oh no, this is probably the hardest part? Or was it just, school just in general? And maybe probably as you grew up going into high school, things got more difficult. 'Cause the learning material was harder, and if you don't know, don't worry.
No, I would say probably the most actually is how people talk to me.
Okay.
That really discouraged me. And then I just felt like at school, I just kind of went by with everybody else. I always winged it. Hoping that I could just get to the next, worrying more than other people. But I never showed it because it was internal. But I would say people. It was people and how they talked to me and how they thought about me. That was huge because that affects you all the way. I mean, people think, oh yeah, just one little thing. I'll say one little thing to you. And you know what I mean? Like, oh, you can't do this. It's like, it affects you, that's how I felt. And now when I see a child or I see this, I'm like, no, you can do it even more, because people don't really understand how harsh that can be.
Mm-hmm.
And that affected me until just last year when I got out, hindering me for so long. And people don't know that because it's not like you're going to go up to them and be like, you hurt me, because they don't understand where you're coming from.
Right.
And my parents didn't understand until probably a couple of years ago. They finally were on my side where they're like, okay, if you need this, I get it. You're taking charge of your life. If you think you need this, go ahead, do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of let me go and let me do it. Instead of trying to figure it out, because I think they came to the senses of, well, I'm scared for my kid to be on pills for just a season. It's not forever. Getting her in counseling because she doesn't have a problem. That's where I feel parents. I feel for parents because it's kind of like a lie. You think in this world you got to be like everybody else, and I don't believe in that. Every kid's different. Everybody's gonna go through their own thing, and I think every kid, would need counseling or might need to be on something if it's that bad. That's what I feel for the parents, because you can't just be like, oh, I want my kid to, and I think my parents thought that, so they just kept telling me, you can do it, you can do it. And I'm like, no, I can't. Yeah. And you're like, no, you can't, and then they see it and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, just let me do it, let me handle it. And I actually did handle it more than they thought, so I think that was my biggest thing.
Okay.
Taking charge of yourself.
Right. Now, are you an only child? Do you have any siblings?
I have a brother and sister. They're twins.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and are you the oldest?
Nope, I'm the youngest. They're 4 years older than me. Yeah.
Okay. So how was that? Obviously, was there any, were there any differences? Did you feel like maybe, your sister and brother were going to school, they probably didn't have to study as hard as you did? Did you feel like, you maybe wish things were easier for you? I know you touched a little bit on this, but, when you're at home and you live with siblings, I'm an only child, but if you live with siblings and so forth, sometimes, things just, they seem to, things get close, and sometimes, certain feelings come out that wouldn't come out with your friends or.
Well, because they were 4 years older than me, I kind of remember some things, but it didn't really bother me as much because they were older, 4 years older, so they were always doing stuff, always busy, so they weren't around as much. Now where I see where they're at, I hope to be where they're at, you know,
They're role
my
models.
brother. Yeah. And I know it did come easier to them. I mean, well, my sister, it was kind of hard. Not as hard as what I had it, but it was kind of hard, her language and writing. But it was nothing severe of what I had. My brother, it came easy to him. He didn't even care, you know, of course. The kid that doesn't care comes easy too. So my brother has always been my, you know, mentor through everything. Not like my sister hasn't, but, you know, just we're just a lot more alike. And so not really, but it was the opposite. They really thought that I was babied. They didn't really understand where I was coming from. They didn't really have patience. Like I have so much patience helping my parents, you know, just helping people where they don't have patience, you know. So they don't really understand my sister to this day. And I was like, I will show her one day, not in a mean way, but I just feel like she doesn't think I'm good enough, like smart enough for things. So she tries to baby me still, you know, just that nurturing, like, you know, trying to tell me what to do and everything. And I'm like, I'm not your little sister anymore, you know, like I'm this age. So I do in my heart still feel that. I don't know how long that will last, but you know, it's one of those things, but we're two different people too. And I have to tell myself that, like, from what I've went through, what she's went through, you know, they always thought my parents gave me everything because they're the twins. The little one gets everything. It just happened like that. I'm just cool. No, I just felt like that's what it always was, and I always had to prove to her that no, like that's not. Now I just kind of let it go, you know, because I was like, you'll see it in the end. Like I can't really do anything about it, you know. But yeah, we're just like two different people. But I just know like she just thinks I'm her little sister and I don't really understand. Let me tell. I'm like, no, you have two other kids, you know. Like I told her that when she got married. I was like, well, now you gotta worry about your husband, not me anymore. Like, you know, so it's like hard because whatever I go into to my sister, because she's older, she thinks that, you know, I don't know anything, you know, when I'm going in. So I have to kind of put myself back and be like, you know what? She'll see it in action. You know, I can't really tell her anything. So that was like the hardest part because I wanted them to be proud of me for so long because I did have this and they didn't really understand it. Or they just didn't understand like, why haven't you been doing this like everybody else, you know, or what, you know. So I think, but I know in the end I would be more successful, not in a mean way, but just saying like I would have a lot more, I could do a lot more things that I know they can't do now.
Right.
You know?
So, you know, so there's obviously tons of people that have learning challenges. And so what advice would you give to another person that's either just recently diagnosed with dyslexia or any other types of challenges or is struggling post getting diagnosed? Do you have like any words of advice? Yeah, what would you say to them?
To not give up.
Going.
Yeah, to not give up.
Okay.
I mean, it will come around, you know, just depending when it's your timing. I believe in that. So I just believe that everybody's here for a purpose. They're gonna make it. And that God made them for a reason. So I know it will happen. I truly believe too, when people come in your pathways, like God puts them in your pathway for a reason and they'll help them through it. I know that they'll succeed, you know, and I always just tell them that you'll be more successful than others. Maybe not now, but you will be by the time you're their age or a little older, you know. So you have to accept that. I mean, it's hard to accept. I mean, it's been a long time. And it's hard for parents, I can imagine, you know. Through that, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. I probably wouldn't have anything like a story to tell if I didn't go through it. And for parents, you know, I recommend always reading like the laws of the early education and stuff like that, just to know what they need to know before their kid goes into the school district or anything, because you kind of want to know stuff about it before you go, so you kind of know what's wrong, what's right, if the school district is doing the right thing. That's something my mom was telling me about, certain things like that. I think that's a huge thing. Like I'm actually that I need to know as a candidate, because I just feel like if I was a parent in the shoes of that, I would want to know everything possible. Like research as much as you can for your community and helping your child at a very young age, and
Right.
counseling as soon as possible, no matter how young they are.
Right.
I feel like that's what can get you through.
Yeah. So this has been wonderful. You're an inspiration. This was so great. Thank you for sharing.